All right. So somehow we are already in October.
It happens.
It happens fast. And last time we did a full quarterly market report, we didn't quite have the numbers that were compelling to say there was a shift occurring, but we all felt it in kind of different levels. So some of it was transactions. We were seeing, challenges there. From the qualifying broker side, you were seeing it. And now we're starting to see it on the web analytics side. So now we have 3 months worth of data to look back at. And in some ways, it looks like we were correct. There's been a shift in the market. And so this quarter, it's more of a question of where are things heading towards the end of the year, and where are we going to see the biggest market settling. And so looking at the report we put together, in the middle of it, we have median prices year over year increases, and then we have total number of units percentages for those same areas, and for the most part it's decreases. So Laura, what are we seeing across the board? Like, what's the general consensus of what's happening in the market?
Across the board for this year, we've certainly seen a slowdown. The interest rates went up in, I think it was June, and that kind of called a halt to the wild and crazy market that we've seen the past couple of years. First-time home buyers are having a much harder time qualifying. Cash buyers are still strong, of course. We're seeing higher inventory because properties are staying on the market longer, generally in the 60 to 90 day range, assuming they're priced right. And buyers have more of a handle on things. It's not as much of a seller's market anymore.
Yeah, so after 2 years of, there's no other way to paint it, just almost crazy market. Now we're starting to see a little bit more of a settling back to the norms, if you will.
Yeah, and I think it's a healthy thing, frankly.
I
think that it's good. It's gonna it's gonna level the playing field a little bit.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of buyers would agree with that, and some sellers maybe not so much.
Sellers
yeah,
are
maybe not
so
much. Well, but let's touch on that real quick, because from a seller's perspective, looking at the data that is the average price, but also the median price, year over year, some of those areas saw increases of 20 to 30%. So I think sellers should still feel pretty good.
I think sellers are still feeling good about it. I think some of them are feeling a little bit too optimistic. I think there's a learning curve here.
Sure.
Sellers are starting to realize that, gosh, maybe we're not seeing quite the appreciation that we saw the past couple of years, and then they're getting an education. Prices, we're seeing more price decreases than we were a year ago, and I think things are starting to get a little more realistic.
So Gabs, I know last time we talked about this, you were mentioning that you were seeing a lot more terminations. What's been happening this last quarter?
We've definitely seen less terminations. They're still out there. But one of the interesting things that we've been seeing is there have been more, I hate the term bidding wars, but multiple offer situations. And I guess it just really depends on the price point, because some listings are still sitting and having a hard time selling. Others, and I think that actually speaks to what Laura was just saying, right? Some sellers have not yet caught up with what the market's doing.
Sure.
Others, if the price is right, they're getting a ton of these buyers who have been just waiting on the back burner for these prices to come down a little bit. So we're seeing a lot of multiple offers. We've had a few where it's cash, a few where they're waiving contingencies like inspections. So again, if the price is right, people are still moving really quickly.
Yeah, and I think that's actually something important to note, is we are still having properties that we list when they go live that are going under contract in 24 hours. And that's still occurring, just not quite at the churn rate that we had, let's say, 3 months ago.
Right.
So you mentioned interest rates. It sounds like interest rates are still going up. That hasn't slowed necessarily. The Fed has announced that it's going to continue to hike towards the end of the year. What sort of impact are we going to see moving forward?
I think it has a huge impact for starters, on first-time home buyers.
Sure.
And on the lower end of the market, where we're seeing a lot more people who need loans. Today, I spoke with a lender this morning. 30-year fixed is at 7.625. The rumor is that's going to go up 0.75 of a point sometime in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Which is a huge hike. And I think people will pause and then get used to it, just as they have been all along, and start to factor it in. And I think that the higher end properties, maybe in the 5 to 9 range, are going to see a slowdown, at least among people who need loans.
Well, how about people who have an existing property, want to sell it, and maybe move laterally or up in the market? Are they now being pinched by these interest rates?
Yes and no. I think if they have, it depends on how much cash they're going to be able to put down. I think that if they're selling, if they don't have a mortgage, they have a bunch of cash, then yeah, they can do it. If you're putting down 50%, then you're not going to be quite as pinched, because obviously your loan's going to be smaller. Another interesting thing is, I think that people are starting to think more about seller financing.
That would make sense.
Yeah, and not everyone can afford to do that. A lot of people need to get the cash out of the property in order to buy whatever they're going to buy next. But if you think about it from an investment standpoint, here you've got this investment that can make you, even if you're not charging the going interest rate, say you get a 5 or 6% interest rate on your financing.
Yep.
That's a huge improvement over what a bank can give you, what the stock market can give you.
Yeah, it's a compelling option if you're a seller. If you're a seller in that position, that you can swing that. Yeah, you could technically outperform the market right now.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's an interesting option that some people should consider if they have it.
I think it's a tough one. It's a tough nut to swallow, and there's the uncertainty of well, what if they default and what do I do? But I think it's something that a lot of people should consider if they can.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that we didn't really touch on, because it only happens so often, is that we have an election cycle that we're heading into right now, right? So next month is the midterms and general election. Historically, we've seen some effects on the real estate market. So I'm just kind of curious, what have we seen in the past?
I mean, I think in the past it's kind of mellowed out for a little bit. It's like, the waters kind of settle and people wait to see what's going to go on. But, as soon as that's over, you start to see much more activity. So I think there's definitely a pause in the market whenever it's like an election period.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we're starting to see a little bit of, just looking at pending sales, right, which are kind of the canary, if you will, for the next month or so. Almost all indicators are showing that the pending sales have slowed down. Now, granted, heading into the holidays season, that's always a tough time for folks to sell. They don't want to deal with moving during the holidays. But then the election cycle. So we kind of have these two things occurring that can have influence there outside of just the market dynamics, interest rates, and things like that. So not surprised. So on the luxury side, luxury is interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because we've seen a lot of high price listings coming on the market recently.
Well, and over the past year or two, the activity in sales has been pretty good in the luxury market.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that increase has been pretty astounding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But, now there's been a huge spike in inventory.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it almost doubled in the last month, which is kind of astounding.
Yeah, and we've got almost a year's worth of inventory in the luxury market, and we haven't seen that in a while.
Haven't seen that in over 3 years.
Yeah. So it is pretty astounding, and it's interesting because the luxury market, there are an awful lot of cash sales in the luxury market.
Right.
Which is maybe counterintuitive, but it's still a factor. And so I don't think the interest rates are necessarily affecting those buyers. But luxury purchases are sometimes discretionary.
Right.
It's not, I need this as a primary residence. It's, I want to have a house in Santa Fe. And they're slowing down. They're watching the economy, they're watching the stock market, and thinking twice and 3 times before they buy something.
Yeah.
And so on the other end of that, land sales have been kind of interesting too, because we saw probably the healthiest land from a seller's perspective market in the past year, and now that seems like the brakes have really been put on the land sales as well.
I think that also happens this time of year, particularly because people don't want to think about building in the winter, and it usually picks up in the spring. But construction costs are high, and I don't know that they're going to come down. It's, material costs and labor costs are continuing to go up. So I think that hurts land sales.
Yeah, and also it seems like if you just, from an anecdotal perspective, talking to every builder or developer or contractor, they're booked out.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all busy. So even finding someone to do that might be the biggest challenge. You don't necessarily want to buy land without a plan,
Right.
right? And it's kind of hard to come up with a plan right now. You don't know what the costs are, and you don't know who you can count on.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting challenge for that market,
Yeah. Yeah. It can take twice as long to build a house these days,
right?
as it did 4 or 5 years ago.
Yep.
So if you're a buyer today, looking at the next couple of months, what's your advice?
I'm going to go with the same, I've been saying this over the past couple of videos that we did, but be ready to move quickly, because the market is shifting so quickly from week to week and month to month. Like I said, we've had these buyers on the back burner, and they're just watching the market to see what it does until they see a property that works for them, that's in that price point, and they're jumping on it. So keep your eyes on the market, work with the broker who pays close attention to it as well, and be ready to move quickly. Have all your ducks in a row. Make sure you're pre-qualified if you're getting a loan. Have everything that you need so that you can make that offer and move quickly.
And keep in mind all the tools that you can use to make a good offer. I hate to advise people to waive inspections, but as long as you reserve the right to terminate based on inspections, that's a good tool. As much cash down as you can. Make sure you've got a pre-approval letter from a lender, not just a pre-qual.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then the other caveat I'll give them is don't make an offer until you're sure you want the house. Don't let it sit there forever, but be certain that you really want the house, because as you know, we're seeing a lot of terminations, and some of it is cold feet. Some of it is people thinking
buyer's remorse.
They jump too fast, and oh my goodness, no, I don't want this house. So I think it's much better for everyone involved.
Do your homework.
I mean, it's not a bad time to be in a backup offer position.
It's an excellent time to be in a
Yeah,
backup
so
offer
it's like,
position.
in some ways for buyers, I want to say don't get discouraged. Like if your offer doesn't get accepted and you're in a backup position, that's a good spot to be actually.
And we've been seeing it.
Yeah, we've
too.
seen a
It's
lot of
not
it.
uncommon.
Yeah, we see backups end up in first position.
So don't be discouraged by that. That's an okay spot to be, and actually it could be advantageous what you learn in the process. So
And reserve the right to terminate that backup contract if
you find
something else.
Right.
So keep looking.
So sellers. So we've seen some prices starting to settle and maybe even creep downward in certain price points of the market, right? So from a seller's perspective, what's the advice?
Take a look at the comparables. Take a look at what the market is doing in your location and in your price range, and price it right. Don't follow the market down. Stay on top of what is current. Do whatever you can to make your home appealing. Take care of problems in the house. Remember that curb appeal is big. Think about staging if the house is vacant.
Yeah, we've seen that homes that are move-in ready tend to sell instantaneously, while homes that need some love, for lack of a better term, those homes are still challenged right now.
Yeah, and those are the ones where we're probably seeing more terminations
Right.
after inspections.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, because again, those building materials, the costs of that, it's a lot harder for somebody to get into a fixer-upper.
Yeah, and it's harder to get people to get out there and fix those
Right.
problems.
Okay, so we're heading into the end of the year. 2022 is going to be wrapping up. Any predictions? What are we going to be looking at by the time we do the next one of these?
That's a hard question.
I think people are starting to get used to higher interest rates.
Yeah.
I mean, if they go up dramatically, I think we'll see another slowdown, but then I think people will get used to them. I think that brings people's price points down, obviously, and so I think the luxury market might suffer a little bit. I think the lower end, especially under 350, 400, is going to continue to see a lot of activity, because I think there are people who were in a higher price range who are now going to be
Right,
in
they moved down
range.
a little bit in the market.
Yeah. So that price point is still going to be very lively.
Okay.
What do you think?
Well, I mean, you talk about the increase in interest rates, that's going to force the prices to come down a little bit, right? So then the people who have been priced out for a little while may have more opportunities. So I think that There, you know, based on seasonality, in the winter it's a little bit slower. We're used to seeing that, but I think it'll balance off. It's going to be pretty balanced, yeah.
Yeah, and I think I tend to agree. I don't see a dramatic shift occurring, like anything, you know, really, whoa, wow, didn't see that coming. But it does feel like there's a certain acceptance of where the prices are at. There's a certain acceptance of where the interest rates are at and kind of the state of the world, for lack of better, you know, context there. But as people kind of settle into that, we're kind of looking at a new normal. We're starting to see some of those numbers come back to where they were pre, you know, COVID and the sort of movement explosion we've seen. And so, yeah, you know, I would expect this winter we're going to have the seasonality effect. We're going to have the effect of the elections. We're going to have the effect of the interest rates. And by next year, we're probably looking at a settled in different price points for everyone.
I think sellers are wising up too.
Yeah.
I think this whole shift that we've seen is hitting the sellers, and they're realizing that they got to get real.
Right.
Yeah. It seemed less volatile
Yes.
lately, so.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Especially from the qualifying broker perspective.
Yeah, it does help.
Well, thank you guys. Look forward to the next one, and we'll see if we were right or wrong.
Cool.
Well, thank you guys. We'll see if we were